Episode 46. Are the unvaccinated going to be second-class people?
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And we're recording. Welcome, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everybody who feels forgotten. Welcome to the very best podcast in the world, personal supremacy through health, wealth, and happiness. Now, when I started this show, or the idea, I was thinking of focusing only on these three topics: health, wealth, happiness. And I never wanted to go down the slippery slope to start a debate, including politics or doctrine or public opinion or whatever. Now, one of the first episodes I mentioned, I called Sacrificing a Virgin to rid the world of the coronavirus. This was more sarcastic than anything else because I immediately qualified what I was trying to say. However, and this is going to be a first, and I hope it's going to be a last, I have decided, because it can be in the furthest sense and taken out all of the political hubbub, etc., categorized into the subject of health and happiness. And here's why. Now, as a disclaimer, first of all, I am not a medical professional. However, I have consulted the opinion of medical professionals, none of those with the tinfoil hats, just regular medical doctors out of my network, and have thereby formed, I hope, a qualified opinion about what's currently happening in the world. That's topic number one. Number two, disclaimer number two, I am not in any way a travel industry professional, even though I have worked in the travel industry for a significant amount of time, I believe. Both of those set in parentheses, I'm a fucking great researcher and a very quick one, and I have a gut feeling that I can rely upon in 99.9% of the times. And this leads us to what happened last week, when Qantas, Australia's airline, I think it's a state-owned airline to a degree, the Qantas CEO announced that they were working on to update their travel restriction. Their travel. What is it called? The terms of travel, I think, something like that, so that only vaccinated people can fly on Qantas flights. This led to a shitstorm. One of the first tweets going out after that and was significantly retweeted was a travel agency that said, hey, dear customers, we're not going to be offering Qantas flights anymore because we deem this to be a measure that we cannot ethically support. Now, shortly after that, the IATA, the International Air Travel Association, I think is what the abbreviation is supposed to stand for, follows suit in that they issue not directly forbidding people to go on the planes, but you have to have, and they're working on that, a travel pass, in which will be kind of like saved your vaccinations and whatever. Not the details are sketchy, and I noticed that this was going on because a lot of code monkeys being programmers, a condescending word, were being sought after for a project, and the deliverables kind of led me to think that something like this was going to be developed. Now, we have to mention that if there is one industry that is suffering disastrously, it's the travel industry and the tourism industry. They are taking the biggest kick in the ass of their lifetime through this COVID-19 issue that we're going through globally. And we ourselves have been victim to the disastrous outcome that's been taking place, in that our Airbnb that we rent out has taken a significant hit. That being said, it's not that bad for us, because for us it's more fun and games than anything we really rely upon financially, monetarily. But I can imagine that, taking us as a very, very small operation, that scaling that entire thing up, a lot of tourism and tourism-related industries are suffering in a dire way. I don't know. Is that a way to put it? I think so. Sorry. And that being said, of course, we are seeing those industries pushing for a solution which would restore them to pre-COVID. My God, I never thought I would say that, but pre-COVID era, where, of course, they need to make business, because the industry damage was quoted between, believe the numbers as you will, but 80 to, I think the largest number I read was $122 billion. That's the impact that the travel industry alone the airline industry, is quoting as damage through the IATA. So it is understandable that they're pushing to return to the pre-COVID era, at least in parts. But I think that this initial push is just leading into a wrong direction. And here's why. A lot of us rely on air travel, period. For business, not for leisure. You don't necessarily need to go on vacation to a foreign country. Your local country probably has, something to offer as well. We had this actually in our Airbnb. We had a lot of German guests throughout the year during the summertime when the coronavirus was hibernating. Sorry, sarcastic remark. And a lot of people from Germany were telling us, damn, we have very nice regions here. We had vacations booked for, I don't know, Turkey and Denmark and the United States and whatnot, and all of that got canceled, and now we're here, and wow, Germany is such a nice country. That's from Germans staying with you, when you get into that polite conversation. So where did I get off on this? Of course, business-wise, travel is mandatory, and now let me tell you why. I have, through my previous lives, accumulated a significant amount of knowledge in a couple of fields, and the most, profitable one or interesting one was cybersecurity. So I was invited to conferences all across the globe to speak and to share my advice and whatever. And then recently I got invited to virtual spin-offs of these conferences, which were on Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever it was at the end of the day. And it is not the same, to be perfectly blunt. In fact, it's just crappy, because the true exchanges that you have with interesting people take place after you give the session. You sit at a bar, you have a drink, you have polite conversation, and there the magic happens. Yes, the sharing information bit is important, but brainstorming ideas with someone just doesn't take place when the speaker's on the podium and gets asked questions out of the audience. Yes, yeah, sure, you can write an email afterwards, but it's not the same quality, at least from my experience. And I hated to travel, seriously, because it was just obscenely time consuming. You had very many people with a double-digit IQ and a triple-digit income at the airports that were harassing you and, I don't know, deliberately or undeliberately trying to make your life miserable, etc., etc. So there are, however, and that's the point I'm trying to make, a lot of people who rely on business travel to get things done, because you're not going to have the same quality of signing a contract through a Zoom conference and sending it via FedEx than doing it on location. Okay, especially if you're dealing with a lot of details and so on and so forth. That's just not going to be the same quality, and businesses are suffering from the travel restrictions as well. This leads us, however, to the plan of the IATA and subsequently Qantas. I don't know who was first in announcing this, that only vaccinated people are allowed to take part in air travel. This brings quite a few problems with it. Now, let's assume we get a vaccination candidate that actually turns out to be good. There's a lot of people going to be rushing towards it, and we've been debating the question, who gets vaccinated first? More likely than not, it's going to be the Western countries and politicians and all of these, very high-risk people, which politicians, of course, are. Sorry, I can't kill the sarcasm. And so we're going to go into a prioritization debate, which inevitably has an ethical flavor to it, because who is in a state or nation or country or collection of countries important, and who most important and who is least important? So who gets vaccinated last? Those who get vaccinated last are the suckers, because they're not going to be able to take part in air travel, right? They're not going to be able to go on vacation. They're not going to be able to conduct business travel. So, who gets the vaccine first? That is, if you want the vaccine. Now, I'm not going to go down the road of the anti-vaxxers with you. Because from my understanding, and even that of the medical professionals I spoke with, this debate is pretty much stupid. Vaccines have been around for a couple of decades, and they've done significant good to humanity, period. There's no debate about that, right? But we had a method of designing a vaccine which had a proven track record of a few decades. This thing that we're looking at now has several approaches, which are none of those which have a proven track record of a few decades. They involve, in some cases, the manipulation of the genome, and in other cases are even more dubious in their way. Now, the fastest vaccine ever approved globally took 5 years, and this was with one of the proven vaccine methodologies or vaccine creation methodologies and processes. And then it took 5 years for the thing to go through all the trial processes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 5 years later, it was approved and it got deployed to the marketplace and got put into people because it was assumed safe. Now, we are at a stage currently, and I'm obviously not the only one who has their doubts, we're looking at a vaccine that has no track record. The technology has, from my understanding, I made a note in one interview that this technology had been tested and tampered with since the 1960s unsuccessfully, and it never worked out. So what makes us believe that all of a sudden, in a matter of months, we're going to be able to, wipe away all safety concerns to the human genome by introducing a foreign genome into the human body? What makes us believe that everything is going to be good? And particularly if we're looking to actually vaccinate billions of people. At least for myself, I cannot think of any situation that would, we have to, take into account the COVID virus. I'm in an age where I'm not in a risk group or risk setting. I'm 41, so, if I catch it, and I won't because I hardly ever leave the house, but I didn't before COVID. If I'm going to catch it, I'm going to have, maybe a mild progression of the disease, whatever. But, there are high risk people out there, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, this has been the fastest vaccine approval with a technology we have no track record of. And I'm begging the question, is this the correct approach, considering that the numbers of the numbers presented to us in the media are sketchy, and there's so much going on around this whole disease that makes it very difficult to fathom the complexity. And I'm very good at connecting dots. That being said, I think those who are going to be reserved, and I'm not talking about the anti-vaxxers, they're out there in their own world. That's okay. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. Let them have theirs. I'm okay with that. Totally. I'm talking about those people skeptical based on the facts. And the facts are that we are looking at a vaccine that is supposed to be introduced, which has, a track record of obviously less than 12 months, or if the vaccination process starts in 2021 in January, we're going to be looking at 12 months of, trial of a vaccine with a totally new technology with no track record whatsoever about delayed implications, et cetera, and that's what I beg to question, whether that is the right approach. Now, let's get back to the air travel sector. If we have one industry setting an example of pushing the vaccines as a prerequisite to take a service, and all of the industries are going to be pushing one after the other because, number one, they want to reopen. The governments are going to say, yeah, but only vaccinated people are, or it's better if the people are going to be vaccinated because we're going to have no forced vaccinations. At least that's what the status is right now. German health minister agrees with a lot of his counterparts, with a lot of his peers, that we're not going to go down the route of having forced vaccinations. However, life becomes pretty shitty if you're not allowed to travel. Let's say you are not allowed into supermarkets. The big supermarket chains are going to require your, travel pass to be green. You're not going to be allowed to take part in events. You're probably going to be forced to walk around with a mask outside. And then we're going down a very, very, very slippery slope. Because I was born and raised in a country where, unfortunately, we have a history of kind of trying to segment people. And that wasn't such a great idea back then. Yes, of course, COVID is there. COVID is a significant health risk to a lot of people. But, shall we as humanity decide to allow the classification of people based on their health status happen? Is that what, over the past centuries, millions and probably billions of people have given their lives to give us these principles of human equality and to give us the freedoms that we live in today? Is that where we actually want to go? And I think that's why I took this provocative heading, whether or not the unvaccinated are going to be the second-class people of the new normal. In that sense, I leave you to think about this on a very distressing, I don't know if it's distressing, because for me, life doesn't change, but for a lot of people it will, if this precedent that the air travel industry is setting kind of gets replicated in other industry sectors. So I beg to differ whether this is the right approach. Anyhow, I haven't asked you how your exercise went, so have you been kind to people? That's another very interesting thing. If you have feedback on that, please email me. I got 2 emails. I'm not going to go into them right now, but it's been very interesting feedback. I'll share them probably tomorrow when I promise, fingers crossed, hope not to die, whatever, that tomorrow we're going to have a more happy episode. This was initially going to be a rant when I started researching it upon Qantas's announcement. But I decided to, contact people, professionals, true professionals, about the medical issues that I had, and spoke with a friend who is a pilot. And interesting developments taking place there. Now, in that sense, peace out, over and out. Keep your hands above the blanket. Have a successful day. I hope you've had a successful weekend being kind to people. If not, revisit episode 45 of Friday, where there was an exercise to be kind to someone for no particular reason. Have a nice evening, night, good night if you are, later in the day and have had your successful day. And in that sense, I think I'm talking just rubbish. I'll just leave you with that and be in touch tomorrow with a more happy, sunshiny episode.